Namaste. I'm Reverend Wendy Craig-Purcell here at the Unity Center in beautiful San Diego. Thank you so much for subscribing to this channel. Please make sure that you like the video you've just watched and consider making a contribution on our app or on our website. It's really easy to do, and thank you in advance for that support. It does make a difference. My title was a play on the attitude that some people have about their work lives, right? That they live for Friday, meaning they live for the end of the work week so that they can not be working. I want to talk to you this morning about how we can change that. And I realize that there are any number of us in this room and online that aren't necessarily working in a company anymore. We may be retired, but there's still the essence of the attitude of how we go throughout our life experience and whether we are enjoying the ride wherever we are going at whatever point in our life. Well, today and this weekend, we're celebrating Labor Day weekend, and I like to go back and remind myself of the history of some of our holidays, because quite honestly, sometimes I forget, except for the really obvious ones. Sometimes I forget, and it's like I want to remember. So I want to share a few facts with you from the National Constitution Center's website about the holiday of Labor Day weekend. So number one, the idea first became public in, do you have any idea about when? The late 1800s, 1882. In September in 1882, the unions of New York City decided to have a parade to celebrate their members being in unions and to show support for all unions. At least 20,000 people were there. That's a lot in 1882. 20,000 people there. Get this, and the workers had to give up a day's pay to attend. Right? Different than it's a paid holiday for most people, but they had to give up a day's pay, and the Library of Congress says there was also a lot of beer involved in the event. Second idea, the New York parade inspired other unions. Other regions started having parades, and by 1887, Oregon, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, and Colorado made Labor Day a national holiday, or a state holiday. Another point, two people with similar names are credited with the first New York City event. Matthew McGuire, a machinist, and Peter McGuire, a carpenter, have both been linked to the 1882 parade, but they were from rival unions. And the similarity in their names, according to a historian at the Library of Congress, the similarity in their names caused a lot of confusion, so it's not known for certain who was really behind that parade. The holiday has evolved over the years. In the late 19th century, celebrations focused on parades in urban areas, but now the holiday is a celebration that honors organized labor with fewer parades, more activities. It also marks the perceived end of summer. And these last two are kind of fun. Can you wear white after Labor Day? How many of you have heard that? Come on, can you wear white after Labor Day? This old tradition goes back to the late Victorian era, where it was a fashion faux pas to wear any white clothing after the summer officially ended on Labor Day. The tradition isn't really followed anymore, and Emily Post explains the logic behind the fashion trend. White indicated you were still in vacation mode at your summer cottage. We all have summer cottages, right? And then the last, Labor Day is the unofficial end of hot dog season. The National Hot Dog and Sausage Council says that between Memorial Day and Labor Day, Americans will eat 7 billion hot dogs. I don't know who the heck counts these kinds of things and what a stat like that is doing in the Library of Congress, but kind of helps us touch those roots, right, of this day that most of us, if we're working, get off as a paid holiday and how it has evolved over the years. So thank God it's today. Thank God you and I are in a teaching that really helps us to learn how to enjoy the ride, no matter how twisty and turny the road may be and how many bumps there may be. So I do want to talk to you about the idea of how do you enjoy it more? A lot of people that are still in their career years, their work years, have this mentality that they are working for someone else. And I think that one of the most important ideas I was taught along the way and early in my work life was no matter who signs your paycheck, no matter where your paycheck comes from, you are always working for yourself. You are always working for yourself. And if you can keep that mindset, that attitude, the way that you approach the work that you do, whatever work that is going to be fundamentally different than if you think you're doing this for someone else, or you think that you're doing this because you have to do it. And there's some spiritual teaching in this as well that I'll get to as I share 4 ideas with you this morning. I have always appreciated and enjoyed the work of the poet Khalil Gibran. One of the most famous books he wrote, it didn't write a book, but it's a collection of his prose and poetry called The Prophet. And he writes a piece in The Prophet about work. And I want to put it into the room and have you just kind of sense the essence of what he's saying and the essence of the mystical approach, I think, the spiritual approach to work. He writes, work is love made visible. Just think about that for a moment, just that line. Can you imagine if every single person who is working, wherever they're working, went into their work environment with that attitude, that mindset, that heart set? How would it be different? For them and for everyone else, it would be qualitatively and fundamentally different. Work is love made visible. And if you cannot work with love, but only with distaste, it is better that you should leave your work and sit at the gate of the temple and take alms of those who work for joy. And if you bake bread with indifference, you bake a bitter bread that feeds but half a man's hunger. And if you grudge the crushing of the grapes, your grudge distills a poison in the wine. And what is it to work with love? It is to weave the cloth with threads drawn from your heart, even as if your beloved were to wear that cloth. It is to build a house with affection, even as if your beloved were to dwell in that house. It is to sow seeds with tenderness and reap the harvest with joy, even as if your beloved were to eat of that fruit. Work is love made visible. And whether it is work that we get a paycheck for doing or work that we do as a volunteer, it is love made visible. Love made visible. Some of us may have grown up with the mindset or with the teaching that we need to work hard. And there's a certain element of that I think is absolutely true. And I think that I believe very much that the pendulum swings so far one way and then it comes back and it seems to swing the other way. And there was for a time period a real strong, hard work ethic. And I think we've lost a little bit of that and are trying to find our way back to kind of a middle ground with that. Yes, working hard and working smart and working with the right kind of mindset. And to me, what that does then is it makes whatever we might think of as hard work much more enjoyable. Much more enjoyable. So there are 4 things I want to share with you this morning about how to make, quote unquote, hard work, whatever it is, your chores at home, whatever it is, to make that more enjoyable. So number 1 is discover and play to your strengths. Discover and play to your strengths. I have a book here that I found now quite a number of years ago, and I was taken by it. The title of it is Now Discover Your Strengths. This book was the result of 25 years worth of research effort and millions of dollars behind the research. And the work was meant to try to identify what are the natural strengths that people have. And in part, the whole concept of this book runs counter to what many of us might have been raised with or even experienced in our work environments, where we were taught to understand what our weaknesses are and constantly work to overcome them. How many of you can relate to that kind of messaging? I know I had a lot of that messaging. And what that tends to leave in a person is we're very aware of where our deficiencies are. And while that can be beneficial, it's not as helpful, according to this study, and I would have to agree, it's not as helpful as knowing what are your natural thematic strengths. That's the way the book refers to it, or signature themes. And if you can identify what those are and weave the approach of using those into your life, whether it is your work life, if you're still in your career years, or the way you approach the responsibilities of adulthood and just maintaining a home and your life itself, that if you can understand, discover, and use what your natural strengths are, you're going to be so much better off. It was these lines in the book that really got me to read the entire book and take the quiz that they have in it. They say most Americans do not know what their strengths are. When you ask them, they look at you with a blank stare, or they respond in terms of subject knowledge, which is the wrong answer. Unfortunately, most of us have little sense of our talents and strengths. Instead, guided by our parents, our teachers, our managers, and psychology's fascination with pathology, we become experts in our weaknesses and spend our lives trying to repair these flaws while our strengths lie dormant and neglected. Do you resonate with any of that? Does that strike a chord of, yeah, I can relate to that. That's kind of the messaging I got. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that a millennial is in that same experience, right? So it's not just generational. And it's not to say that we should ignore or be completely oblivious to where we are weak. But if that's all that we are focusing on, the pathology, if we're just trying to fix that all the time, and never really come to examine and try to understand what are my natural signature traits, the things that I just kind of always show up in my life this way. If we can understand what those are, we can then develop them and we can begin to lead more with those. And so I'm going to quickly read. They found that after these 25 years of study, that there are basically 34 themes. You can look the book up, you can take the test yourself, but these were the 34 themes that they came up with. Activator, adaptability, analytical, arranger, belief, command, competition, context, deliberative, developer, discipline, empathy, consistency, focus, futuristic, harmony, ideation, includer, individualization, intellection, maximizer, positivity, relator, responsibility, self-assurance, significance, strategic, woo. And there are 5 more I'm going to share. I'm going to share the ones when I took this test that came up for me. They're not on this list, I left them out. And I'm going to read the descriptors to you so you get a sense of how they approach these themes. Number 1, I didn't necessarily like this word. Achiever was my number 1. People strong on the achiever theme have a great deal of stamina and work hard. They take great satisfaction from being busy and productive. Yeah, that's true. I don't ever want to be bored. Second was communicator. Maybe you can relate to this one. People strong in the communication theme generally find it easy to put their thoughts into words. They're good conversationalists and presenters. Third, connectedness. People strong in the connectedness theme have faith in the links between all things. They believe there are few coincidences and that almost every event has a reason. Input. People strong in the input theme have a craving to know more. Often they like to collect and achieve all kinds of information. Learner. People strong in the learner theme have a great desire to learn and want to continuously improve. In particular, the process of learning rather than the outcome excites them. What did I lead with this morning when I said my theme is back to school? And I can remember getting all my school supplies and my notebooks and thinking about classes and all of that and the whole energy of learning. You know, when I think about this body of work, the very idea, now discover your strengths and play to them, I can't help but think of some of the damage that has been done in certain expressions of Christianity, where the whole thing in some approaches to Christianity is based in the concept that we are flawed from the beginning. I mean, that's the ultimate, is it not? That puts whatever your parents or your teachers or your culture might have said to you about your weaknesses, your personal weaknesses, to shame in a way, right? To be told that even before you did your first thing, you were born wrong, inherently flawed. No wonder why some of us have some healing to do from experience in church to begin with, but also some healing to do around the beauty and goodness and greatness that is inherent in us, and to own that and to discover that for ourselves. So I really encourage you, if you related too much when I said, are you more aware of your weaknesses than your natural strengths? If you related to that, take a look at this. Just read the words, if nothing else, in the descriptions, and begin to ask yourself, who are you really? And how can you put more of that into the way you show up in life so you can enjoy the ride more? Second idea is to see how you can make it, whatever it is, more fun. Now, I make things fun that are work. But it's fun for me. How do you make whatever it is that is yours to do? And I'm talking about the things you don't like to do. Anybody have things they don't like to do? Okay, every hand should go up, because I can't imagine that there's anyone sitting in this room or watching online that can say every single part of your life you absolutely love. So how do you make it more fun? How do you make it more fun? You step back and you look at, how can I break it apart? How can I approach it with new eyes? Whether it's, balancing your checkbook or paying your bills. There's that little thing we used to really emphasize in Unity Prosperity classes, and I think it still holds to be valuable. Get into the practice every time you write a check or you pay a bill to put the words in front of the payee, it's my pleasure to. And you'll really know you've gotten over a hump when you can do that when you write out a check to the IRS. Right? It's my pleasure to. It's my pleasure to. There's another little book, and I think it's still in print. You know how some books are just really influential? Do you have books that are really influential that you go back to from time to time? This is one of those for me. It's well-worn, it's breaking apart. It's a biography written by Glenn Clark on Walter Russell. The name of the book is The Man Who Tapped the Secrets of the Universe. I think everyone, I really mean this, I think everyone should read this little book, The Man Who Tapped the Secrets of the Universe. Walter Russell was born in 1871. He made his transition in 1963 1963. He was born on May 19th, and he left on May 19th. Kind of interesting there. In this book, you'll learn that he was an accomplished sculptor, painter, and philosopher. He believed that every man has consummate genius within him. Does that sound like unity? Does that sound like metaphysics? It sure does. He became known as a natural philosopher and became known for his unified theory in physics. He posited that the universe was founded on a unifying principle of rhythmic, balanced interchange. That's a mouthful. He was proficient in architecture, music, business, and ice skating. I know, isn't that interesting, ice skating? There's a story in here about him, an approach he took to making hard work fun. And for him, the hard work, one of the examples of hard work, was he happened to be fortunate enough as an adult to be quite prosperous and owned a very large home with lots of acreage, and a lot of that acreage covered in grass that needed to be mowed. Big, time-consuming task. And you know how it's not one of those things you could just do once and then you never have to do it again? This stuff does what? It keeps on growing. It keeps on growing. And he decided he really didn't like it. So he bought himself a power mower that he could sit on and mow his lawn. But after a while, that wasn't so much fun either. But then he got an idea. I'm going to mow my lawn in geometric patterns and designs, leaving some areas unmowed, and then coming back and mowing those. And just, I don't know if that does anything to you, it just blows my mind as a very simple but very practical way to approach something that I might not like doing in my life, and yet I need to do it. How can I make it be fun? Are you still with me? Are you still with me? Does that not sound like spiritual practice? I think it does. I think it does. The way we show up and interact with anything in our life speaks to who we are and speaks to our consciousness, which is at the heart of our essence as spiritual beings. At the very essence of spiritual beings. Here's a third idea. Whatever you do, do it as if you were doing it for God, for spirit, for the universe. Whatever you do it as if you were doing it for something more than just yourself. You know, Jesus talked about the first shall be last and the last shall be first. When his disciples were arguing, basically asking him or arguing among themselves about who he liked best and who he thought was most important, he basically turned their inquiry upside down. He said that to them, if anyone wants to be first, he or she shall be last and servant of all. Boy, that would have put them in their place. Would you not agree? But what was he talking about? I think he was talking about a servant attitude. A servant attitude. A servant attitude is an attitude that says, I am willing to go the second mile. Do you recognize that phrase, second mile? That comes from one of Jesus' teachings. If a man forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. If he asks you for his cloak, your cloak, give him your coat also. He was talking about the way to protect yourself. There's a whole biblical backstory to this that I don't have time to go into. But he was essentially trying to protect his followers from ridicule and harm by saying, when you are forced to do something, do it and do more to protect yourself. So when you're asked to go 1 mile, go 2. When you're asked for your coat, give your coat and give your cloak also. But spiritually, it's a mindset. It's a mindset that says, I'm going to walk through my life not doing the least I can get away with, because who do we work for? Oh, no. We work for ourselves, right? And if we really get that we work for ourselves, then the second mile, though it looks like we're doing it for them, whom are we really doing it for? We really are doing it for ourselves. Emmett Fox, a great early New Thought writer, presented the idea that you will always earn the right when you act as if and you do more than what is required of you. You will either change the circumstance that you are in, or you will earn the right by consciousness to be somewhere else. Meaning, if you're in your work life, your work years still, and you don't like or you don't feel like you're being appreciated for who you are and what you give, you don't hold back, because who are you holding back from? Yourself. You continue to show up with what Jesus would call the servant's heart, or the second mile attitude. It's an attitude of generosity of spirit and heart. Because whether they deserve it or not, who deserves it? You do. And according to Emmett Fox, and this whole teaching you and I are a part of, we change our consciousness with that second mile approach. And it's the changed consciousness that either changes the very circumstances we are in, or earns the right for us to be somewhere else. Of all the things I think we could encourage our young people to do, is to approach whatever is theirs to do with a servant's heart and with a second mile attitude. But to be sure we're explaining to them why, because otherwise they can be used. To be sure that we are explaining to them why. There's another amazing story about Walter Russell in here that I want to quickly mention with this idea of going the second mile. And remember, he was born in, what did I say, 1863, I think it was, 1871. So this is an old story, young man, summer job. He winds up taking a summer job as a bellboy in a very beautiful hotel resort type area. And the salary was all of $8 a month. Okay, yeah, we're talking a long, long time ago, but the story still bears it's an amazingly inspirational story. It was told that even though the salary was only $8 a month, that by the end of the summer of working as a bellboy, that most of the bellboys got about $100 in tip money, which was no small change. And so the very first time one of the guests offered him a tip, something inside of him said, "Don't take it." And he didn't. And he was confused why that something inside him at such a young age told him, "Don't take that tip." And so later on that day, when his workday ended, he inquired inwardly of what that was telling him, "Don't take that tip." And the answer that he got when he probed deeper was, "I'll be the only bellboy who never took a tip. I'll be the best bellboy the world has ever known. I'll give the most joyful and cheerful service that ever a bellboy gave." And so from that moment on, anytime anybody guest asked him to do anything, even above and beyond what he was supposed to do, he did. And he did it with such joy and such quickness that the guests took notice. And they took so much notice that they started inviting him to their dinner parties and onto their big, beautiful yachts. And you can imagine what management said. "No, our workers cannot fraternize with the guests." And the guests said, "Well, if you don't make an exception for him, we will never come back." There's a lot of other little examples in the story, but at the end of the summer, he didn't get $100 in tips. He got, because he was also learning to paint at the time, $850 worth of commissions for artwork, $850 at that time for commissions of artwork, and invitations for legal adoption into 5 very wealthy families. More and more details that I don't have the time to go into, but there was something inside of him, something powerful inside of him that said, "Go the second mile." Jesus was right onto it when he said, go the second mile. And the last thought I share with you, as I'm aware of the time, is to practice giving things the light touch. When you're working, even if you have to just stop for a moment when it feels really heavy or tiresome or mundane, can you stop and give it the light touch? Whether that's a light touch physically, or whether it is just to imagine whatever it is surrounded by light. I am constantly amazed at how some of these very simple practices done in the moment when they are needed, how powerful they can be to shift our attitude, to just say, wait a minute, before I do or spend another moment on this thing with the energy I've been holding, let me stop and give this a touch, a light touch. Just as I think many of us have been raised or indoctrinated in just the hard work ethic, I think we've also been indoctrinated in this idea that everything has to be pushed and struggled through and made to happen. The more that I have tried to be deeply immersed in these teachings, the more I realize how incorrect a lot of that stuff has always been. And that if we can practice approaching everything in our life from a different and spiritual perspective, we will be giving things a light touch. We will find that we are able to enjoy the ride and that we learn and grow so much more. And in the midst of all of that, we will be an inspiration to others. What I know to be true about our teachings, when we really practice them, we show up in life differently. And other people see that or feel that. And we should never be surprised if somebody doesn't say to us, what are you doing? How is it that you're able to be like that? And then share it with them. I think that's how we help to heal our world. Namaste.